underpainting. So I use a dry underpainting rather than wetting it with alcohol. Once I have it down, that will give me something to blend into with my pastel. Same concept as fat over lean. I'm gently working the pastel into the tooth of the ampersand pastel board and softening it so that it will be free to have more layers of pastel added on top. So by doing this, I create a soft surface to blend into. Next, I'm going to start with some of the basic shapes of the clouds. I'm using a light color to indicate where the light's hitting the water. Now I'm softening that edge. Now here's the darkest color in the clouds. It's a deep royal blue. I'm putting it on the bottom part of the clouds. Storm clouds and thunderheads often are way darker on the bottom and lighter on the way up. You can see that reference photo. I'll include the reference photo later. Now, once I have some of the dark shapes in place, then I'm coming in with a medium blue. This is a beautiful, almost a Prussian blue. It's got a little bit of red in it. And I'm putting the main part of the shape of the cloud in. This is a medium value. So I'm blocking in the whole shape. I'm not too worried about the edges of it yet. They're all going to be lost. At this point, I'm just trying to make sure I don't put anything architectural. No hard lines, no hard shapes up in the sky. That never works with clouds. Next, I'm adding something that's a little bit more green. So this is a teal color, and I'm giving some texture to that cloud. There's the teal. You can see it up close. And working it down into the tooth as well. Now I'm using a warmer and a cooler violet. Starting with the cooler violet, I work that in around the teal, and this helps to create some shape and texture to those clouds. So I'm fattening up the clouds, I'm building up the surface, and the pastel is going on smoothly and thickly on top of the light color I have underneath. When I start to blend, I'll pull that light color up into the dark color and it will darken it. It will lighten the dark just a bit. Suffering from a cold, so bear with me here. Next, I am going to add a little bit of light into the body of that cloud and shape the cloud. So this is a violet color. It's, well, actually, this is the darker part just to show that it's coming forward. So that way, when I do add the light, it will push the middle part back. So the darker part is more of a pure violet. So I'm adding that purple in to show you where the dark edges of that cloud will be. Now, I'm going to use my brushes, which are fingers, to gently work that pastel into the tooth of the ampersand pastel board and to clear the way so that when I put some of the lighter colors on top, they'll be softer. This also helps to get rid of any hard edges in those clouds. So the more I work those colors together, the softer the blends appear, the softer the cloud edges look. Clouds are mostly lost edges. The found edge is the sharper edge of the sky behind the cloud. So I really want to take some time and just work my way around blending into that cloud. Notice how blended and soft the reference photo is. I'm using one thumb to pull the rain down, and I didn't add any pastel to that. That's just the dark, and that smooth motion of the side of the thumb just pulls the rain right down, creates a lovely illusion of a slanted rainfall out to sea. And now I continue around softening those edges even more. I'm just pushing and pulling that pastel, working it with my fingers, filling up the tooth of the surface as I do this so you don't see any of that board showing through. And I'm just using my fingers to push that pastel around and show it who's boss. As I do this, you can see how it lightens a little bit because I'm pulling up some of the white pastel that's underneath. So the more you do that, the more it softens the overall color and tone of the cloud. When you look at it up close, you can see that it's all lost edges. There's barely any marks at this point, but we'll change that later. Working that pastel down into it, going methodically around the whole shape of the cloud, building up the texture, building up the layers. Now you're starting to see some beautiful rich colors. My favorite pastels are Mount Vision. For this painting, I'm using a lot of the Thunderstorm set, which makes sense. It's beautiful blue violets and gray violets and lots of blues and beautiful colors for painting clouds. I always keep a washcloth off camera and I wipe my fingers clean each time I blend. So at this point I'm cleaning those brushes and getting them ready for the next round. Now, I still have a lot of pastel on my fingers. Sometimes I use that pastel to make some shapes. Right now I'm creating the illusion of some clouds in the background behind this thunderhead, just using the pastel on my fingers, working it down into the tooth of the board. I already have a smooth layer of white pastel down on there. So anything I blend into it creates some lovely texture. See some of the shapes of the clouds, you see the sky poking through. So I'm coming in with some sky color here and I'm making sky holes in those clouds. I want to soften the edges of the sky holes so they don't look too architectural and it feels more like the sky peeking through the clouds. The blue I'm using is a deeper sky blue. You always want to go deep towards the top of the cloud and lighter towards the horizon. That will help reinforce. Now, I don't usually spend this much time on one part of the painting. Now we have some hard edges on those clouds. But this is really the subject of the whole painting. Break them up. The beach scene, the water, all of that is maybe a fifth of the painting. It's on the bottom. I may come back later and put some kind of a beautiful bird in there. But for now, I'm going to put I'm putting a little light yellow violet, like titanium white, blue violet, to show where the sun is lighting the edge of the cloud. Lighten up. This will give it a middle part of the cloud and make that dark part of the cloud come forward. That I mentioned before. I'm just putting a touch of it in there. You can see already help reflect how it starts to create shape and texture in that cloud. Notice I don't blend as much. Once I start to put those initial layers on, I stop blending as much. So now I'm just titanium white, putting some pastel on through the composition and where else can it go, and barely touching it in places. When I feel satisfied, an edge here and there that I've created, and color letting harmony. The rough part of it show through. This creates multiple layers in the cloud. And now I'm going to add some of the underpainting underneath the cloud, and that will create a beautiful warm look for that sunshine. Since I have it in my hand, I'm going to use it elsewhere in the composition. I'm also adding a little more texture to the clouds behind this thunderhead. That will help make the foreground come forward. I want to make it very dramatic. The background recede. There's a little bit of yellow on top. I also want to keep most of the edges in the cloud pastel, but a few edges here and there found. So that gives you the shape and form. And I'm going to put that yellow thunderhead somewhere in the foreground as well. Now this has given me a fairly strong steady and lost and found edges. And they're really like good thing to try. I'm putting a few light rays coming out of the light. You know, the more you play with lost and found edges, the better you get at it. This also helps to mimic the rain under the cloud, creates a nice
Now
rhythm
I'm making
in the
the
painting.
clouds behind
I'm
the thunderhead
some of
with
that
a little
white
more Rio,
down below the
incorporating
green.
that sky hole.
Punch it up a bit. Now my favorite color is teal.
And now you can see a
I'm
lot of texture
holding the
up there in
teal
the sky.
horizontally.
The
in my
cloud
fingers
has some dimension
and
to
sliding
it.
it right across.
It's got
to
some
make
wispy
perfectly
texture,
straight
some
line.
lost and found edges.
It's much easier
It's
to get a
beginning
straight
to look
line using the
a
whole
lot
pastel
more like a rain
horizontally
cloud
than it is to use a thin
So while I
edge
have
on
these
its
colors
side.
in my hand,
Try it a few times and
I'm
you'll
keeping
see what
them
I mean.
set aside
That dark edge
so that
really
I can use them
creates
for the water and the
horizon.
water reflection.
The horizon should be perfectly flat.
And water always lays flat, so you want to make sure your horizon is flat. Now I'm coming in
Making
with this
sure I
overall
have
light
all of the
color
edges
to
in
the
that
water.
cloud that I want.
This is an interesting light
Sharpening up
effect that
some of the
happens on the
dark
ocean
edge.
when there's a storm brewing. The color of the water is sometimes lighter than the color of the sky. So that's the effect we're capturing here. The water is really roiling.
I have multiple colors
and
in
it's
this
turned
cloud.
up blue,
Blue,
greenish,
violet,
Gulf of
violet,
Mexico green. I'm going to
blue
create a
gray,
few waves by separating
lavender.
the waves in front.
All of
so
these
that
colors
they're
help to give a
darker
dimension.
and spaced further apart in front. I'm using the same color I used up in the sky for the cloud. And I'm spacing those lines closer together the further back they go.
Now I'm using the light
Water
color to
overlaps
negative
the sand.
space paint
So I'm having that
around
water
the cloud.
come forward a little.
And to help
Now
create
I'm
some
dappling
dimension
it with light
in other
mixing
parts.
it up, and I'm putting some foam
So lighter
on the tops of the
pastels
waves behind
this
the darker
is a
parts of the
cool
clouds.
white help to
Not the yellow white, and
create
so
like a
it
silver lining
creates like
around the
a
cloud.
I
A
always do
reflection
this
of
because
some
it's
of
so
the
beautiful
coolness
up in the
hopeful.
sky, especially on a
Now we have a
thundercloud.
few breakers.
Make sure the waves in front are taller,
Once I start
darker,
on one
and
side, I
spaced
take it
further
around through
apart
the
than
whole
the ones in back.
composition.
And that
While I have
further
this color
creates
in
the
my
illusion
hand.
of perspective.
Where else can I use it?
How can I use it to create color harmony? A little touch, unify those colors, blend them just a bit. A little touch in the foreground. Now I'm ready to start putting in some sand, creating a nice illusion of perspective at this point. So I'm going to put my warmer colors in the foreground so that they come forward, and my cooler colors in the background. Two colors I'm using are most often used for flesh colors. They're like a red violet, and that's for the dark wet part of the sand. I'm going to go on top of it with a warmer version of the same color. It's got a little bit more yellow to it, and this will give the illusion of wet sand. Just to further that illusion, we need to have some dark in the foreground. I want to keep my darkest dark in the foreground instead of having it in the rain. So I'm punching up some of the darks in the waves and where the water overlaps the sand. And I think I'll add some of that dark seaweed that you see in the foreground on the reference photo. And that will really help create that, further that illusion of perspective and depth. Just a couple of sea grasses to overlap the water. Maybe lighten, put some texture around them. I may come back into this painting at some point in the future and put a bird in there. Never finished without a bird. And there you have it. Not that difficult to create the illusion of clouds. Just to reiterate, make sure your warm colors are in the foreground, cool colors are in the back. Make sure there are no hard architectural edges. And join me every Wednesday night for online pastel classes.